Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, thank you for finding me. I hope you enjoy the video. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, comment, all that fun stuff. Everything that YouTubers tell you to always do, because guess what? It does, in fact, help. So I'm here today with a review. It is a review of a disc which contains two films. It is the first disc in the Cinematic Vengeance box set from Eureka. It is the films of Joseph Koh, and I will be talking about 7 Grandmasters and 36 Deadly Styles, which are the two films on this disc. So if you missed my video where I give an overview of this set, it's divided into two halves. The first half is the first two discs, and the second half is the second two discs, and each disc is a double feature. So what I'll do here is basically I'll talk about, because I'd never seen either one of these films before, I'll talk about the films and the bonus material, which is commentary track on each one, just kind of individually. So I'll talk about 7 Grandmasters first, I'll talk about 36 Deadly Styles after that. I will say that these films look incredible. These are amazing remasters. Like, every time I see films from, like the 70s, like those old school Kung Fu and martial arts films looking like this, I kind of have to pinch myself. It's like really mind-blowing. They did an amazing job with this release. In the commentary track for 36 Deadly Styles, Mike Leader actually says that he's kind of astounded looking at the print, that it looks like it was filmed yesterday, and it's like a 40-year-old movie. It's really kind of amazing. So the first film is 7 Grandmasters. I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about 36 Deadly Styles. I loved this movie. I really did. I really enjoyed the crap out of this movie. It's 88 minutes long. I'm just going to read you the cast here because there's a lot of people in it. Jack Lung, Yimin Lee, Nancy, I can't even read my own freaking handwriting. Nancy Yen, Corey Yun is in this, actually, and he was one of the fight choreographers. So that's really cool, and that's like a direct connection to, like the classic 80s era in Hong Kong cinema and stuff. Alan Choi Chung-san, and Mark Long, who's actually the brother of Jack Long. He plays his disciple in this film. So to give you an overview of the plot, it's relatively simple. There's this guy who's being declared like this great master of martial arts. And at his ceremony where he's going to announce his retirement, he's challenged with someone saying, "You're not really the greatest martial artist," whatever. And he's like, I now have to go fight everybody. So he decides to do like this loop of all of China and fight the champions of every province. And so it's kind of like this road movie aspect, but then as they're traveling, this young guy comes and he wants to be a disciple of the master, and he starts following him everywhere, and then finally he's accepted as a disciple, and then he becomes really prodigiously talented at Kung Fu, and their relationship, it develops a lot. And then the movie is actually really unexpectedly nuanced, I think, in the character and the plot, because you end up getting flashbacks as the movie goes forward, explaining the motives of the characters, and it's really, really interesting, and it gets more and more complicated the further it goes along. And I don't want to spoil it and say more than that, but it's a really interesting film. The structure of it is really interesting, and the use of flashbacks is really interesting. And in the commentary track, Frank Jeng and Michael Worth actually talk about how Joseph Koh is known for kind of flashback structures like that, and films that appear relatively simple on the surface but get more complicated as they go along. So I actually really, as a writer myself, and as someone who has worked in the film industry in the US on the writing side of it, because I've talked about this before on the channel, but if you're new to the channel, for many years I read screenplays for studios, production companies. I worked with screenwriters who were trying to finish screenplays and needed help with it. I've worked with individual producers before and stuff like that. So I've read thousands of screenplays professionally. And so story is something that I pay a lot of attention to when I watch these movies. And the story here was really interesting, and it was a really interesting structure and a unique approach to telling this type of story. So, I really enjoyed this film. And like I said, really interesting story, really interesting development of the story, and there's non-stop fighting. So if you are a fan of old school Kung Fu movies, I think you'll love this movie. And I know it's considered like a classic of the genre. So if you're a long-standing fan, you've probably already seen this film before. But if you're new to the genre or whatever, I think you will really like this movie. It's just within the first 10 minutes, there's 3 or 4 fights, and there's all these different fighting styles, animal styles. It's all shapes type stuff, but then there's weapons fighting too, and there's acrobatic stuff and leaping kicks, and there's some really cool stunts, and there's a really cool training sequences actually, and there's this thing where this guy slides, or they're practicing this move where they slide along the ground and kick people almost like they're sitting on a skateboard. It's really cool. So it's a really fun movie. It's kind of over the top, and it has a lot of energy, which is something else I really like about these films so far. They have a lot of handheld camera. Location photography is incredible outside in Taiwan. It's really beautiful scenery, mountains, forest, jungle, stuff like that. And the films are, it's not like with these Shaw Brothers films, you get a lot of camera on a tripod, people in a set talking, and it has this very, and this is not to knock the Shaw Brothers films, because I love those films, but these films they're more kind of like unpredictable. And in my overview of this set, I kind of described it as like shooting from the hip. Like, it has this kind of maverick style to it that feels like independent filmmaking that I really, really like. So I don't have anything negative to say about Seven Grandmasters. I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. The second film in that double feature was 36 Deadly Styles. This one, I should say Seven Grandmasters, but I didn't say, it was released in 1977. 36 Deadly Styles came out in 1979, so 2 years later, and the cast for this is Hwang Jong-lee, asterisk, I'll talk about that in a second, Jack Lung, who's in the other film, Chen Lik, Jeannie Chang, Bolo Young is in this film, and Mei Shang Fan, who you'll notice from tons of stuff. And I got a really great cast. This movie was really interesting to me because it's basically two films happening at once. And I loved one of them, and the other one is just not my cup of tea. So you have this really interesting story of these two kind of sects. One of whom is like kind of a family, and the other one is these kind of like, long hair, mustache, beard sweeping, like evil guys, right? And there's bad blood between them going back years, and the one sect is trying to like hunt down and kill the other people, and they're all in hiding. And that story is really interesting, and like the pursuit of them and stuff like that. Now, the youngest member of these people who are in hiding is this handsome young man who gets into a lot of kung fu comedy hijinks. What does that remind you of? Maybe Jackie Chan. So, and this was after, obviously, Snake and Eagle Shadow and The Drunken Master. So, to me, and Arna Venno and Mike Leader actually talk more extensively about this on the commentary track, but even before I watched the commentary track, right away I was like, man, this is an obvious ripoff of Jackie Chan, and they go into details on that more in the commentary track, but it's not like in the Jackie Chan movies, his character growth is directly related to his hijinks, and in this it's just like random scenes of comedy. And that just didn't appeal to me. So if you like that kind of stuff, I think you'll dig that section of the film. But I kind of really preferred the more serious like story of like bad blood and revenge and hunting these people down and being in hiding and stuff like that. There's a lot of fight scenes in this movie. And I will also say that I really like the characters in this film. And in the last like 25 minutes, it comes together like gangbusters. And everything just kind of like locks in, and it's awesome. Like the final act of this movie is awesome. And so it left a really good taste in my mouth, because at the end of it, I was like, oh, the ending was so good, that I wasn't thinking about the stuff kind of throughout that kind of threw me off the main trajectory of the film. Now, to talk about the commentary track here, like I said, it's Mike and Arna. I mentioned Hwang Jong-lee. He's in it, but how much is he in it, and how much are doubles playing him? And Mike and Arna actually go into that, and it's really interesting. And they point out where you can clearly tell it's not Hwang Jong-lee in those scenes, and that's really, really interesting. They talk about Taiwanese stunt performers and the reputation that they have kind of around the world. They talk about, one thing I found really interesting was they talk about the scenery in this film, which is a lot of it is shot outside, which I really liked. Like I said, with Seven Grandmasters, really cool Taiwanese scenery. And they talk about how Taiwanese scenery matches really well with Korean scenery, but neither one of them matches with Hong Kong scenery. And so you'll have films that are shot part Korea, part Taiwan, and stitched together, and you can't tell the difference, but you couldn't do that with Hong Kong. And I thought that was really interesting. They talk about the different roles of people who work at a Buddhist temple or live there, which I thought was really interesting, because, usually you get people talking about, like, this guy's a monk, this guy's an abbot, but they talk about, like, other people, like this guy, whatever, like, who live there who are not part of that. And there's a really interesting section about IFD versus Filmmark, which you'll know about if you're a big fan of, like Godfrey Ho and those types of movies, but that was really interesting. And then Bolo Young is in this film, and they talk about his career in a way that's really interesting. Obviously, he's very famous in the West, but they talk about how he's perceived in Hong Kong, which I thought was really interesting. Now, I'm just realizing I forgot to mention stuff about the audio commentary for Seven Grandmasters. This was done by Frank Cheng and Michael Worth. It's a fantastic commentary track. Michael Worth is a filmmaker and an actor, and his insight into how films are made and into the martial arts and stuff like that is fantastic. He talks a lot about the editing. He's like, in this fight scene, they're using these types of zooms and these types of edits to create this type of energy around this type of fighting style. Like, it's really fascinating. He points out, like, what's the longest shot in the film and how long it runs. And, like, he talks about the lenses and the, anamorphic lenses and how they create a distorting effect and the depth of field. It's really, really awesome and fascinating. And then Frank brings what he always brings to these commentary tracks, was it's just his amazing amount of knowledge of, like, the career of the filmmaker, the career of all the other people, and then also the cultural context of the film, where he really explains some stuff of, like, this guy is doing this in this scene for this reason as related to, you know, like the cultural context of where he's from and Taiwan and China and these things. And it's really interesting to have that insight to kind of understand it. And he also translates all the Chinese, the written Chinese that's seen on the screen. And he explains, like, you know, in the subtitles it says this, but literally it means that, and here's what this really means, and like that. It's really, really cool to have Frank's insights and his depth of knowledge and his experience with the culture and stuff like that. And then to have Michael Worth with him talking about the filmmaking techniques. They talk a lot about the fighting styles, which is not something I know a lot about. So that was really cool. So I really, really enjoyed this disc. It was a great double feature, and I'm really excited to go forward into this set. There are 3 more discs in the set. It's a 4-disc set. There are 8 films. It is Cinematic Vengeance, the films of Joseph Koh. It is from Eureka, and there will be a link in the description of this video if you want to learn more about it. My name is Will. You are watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and we will see you next time.